Have you ever looked around and thought, I'm not supposed to be here? Ever felt like something was off or just didn't fit as well as you thought it should?
Yeah.
How did you respond to that feeling? Let's talk about the possibilities with Sheena Thomas.
Uh, don't know why he told me talk to you. Ran all these lies, guess you can use some truth.
Everyone. Got one of our dynamic sisters, women of the church. She is like the Swiss Army knife of all things business professionally, and that is Sheena Morgan. So, excuse me. I'm sorry. She corrected me. Sheena Thomas. And if you guys don't know the story of the Thomases, like, let me be the first to say this is like the official small group wedding of the church to this point. Like, tell us, maybe you can start out telling us about how you two connected.
Oh goodness. I had to whisper Thomas because my husband will get me because he told me when we got married, every other name was no longer to be said. So no, we met in a small group at Oak Gardens. I'm looking at the sign now. It was the OG business professionals. And he'll tell you a completely different story, but I just saw him in the group. He introduced himself and I was like, oh, he's a nice looking dude, and didn't think anything else about it. We went out one night, met for dinner, and the rest was really history. I mean, we took the long path of dating and getting to know each other. It was funny because Pastor Dave was doing this series on blended families and everything. And so we were asking each other those, important questions. And yeah. He decided to ask me to marry him. And I said, yes, he stuck around this long. Why
not? No, I think that's, it was dope to see you guys. And I remember Demo, who is obviously who we're talking about, DeMarcus, who's a great guy. I remember him reaching out and saying that you guys were talking and asking me to join him in prayer about it. And so it was kind of, it's fun to see it. And I tell them this, like, it's great to see what God has done in you guys' lives. It gives confidence and hope to others, I'm sure. Because I'm like, along the way, when you start a new relationship, especially one that's born out of church, and we are an intimate church, like it's it's not like you can hide in one side of the sanctuary or another, like if things didn't go well. So just kudos to you guys, instilling hope in all of us that we could find that person and find the right at church in a small group.
Absolutely. It can happen. It can happen. Yeah. I mean, quick, funny story. We each asked each other because we sat in two different sections of the church and we were talking and, I was like, hey, you think we're ready to sit together in church? And we talked about that and we were like, once we do it, like it's over. Once we start sitting together, the whole church is going to know. And I'm telling you, it happened. We were sitting together and then all of a sudden it was, oh gosh, Demo and Sheena, I think they're dating,
Right? It's like the gossip still enters the church house, right? And not in a negative sense, but just the what's going on and what's the tea, so to speak. So, Sheena, you've accomplished a lot in life. And there is, I think if we went to any corner of Dallas, someone who knows you or knows of you and what you've accomplished here. But kind of tell us about your journey. Tell us about what part of your history has made you the believer you are today.
Oh, wow. So for those that don't know, like my entire professional background has been around supplier diversity. So advocating for minority-owned, women-owned businesses. Started doing that in the summers. Just, my dad wouldn't let me sit at home. So I had to, go to work with him. And I just grew a passion for the plight of the minority business owner, just really sitting and listening to their stories, hearing some of the things that they struggled with, and then just celebrating in their wins and how they were growing their businesses and everything. And so I guess for me, just what has gotten me to this point was really the examples that I saw in the elders before me. So, I mean, my dad was one, watching him every single day, learning the nuances of how you become that servant leader, um, learning how to be, humble, learning how to listen more than you speak. People will often say that I'm quiet. I'm not really quiet. I just enjoy observing to really get to know what somebody is thinking, how they're feeling. I think that's much more important than what I need to say at that very moment.
All right. So that example really set by your father of finding humility, and being humble, listening and observing, and taking in all of that information, processing, how did that shape you into the believer you are today? Like, what skills do you think it was giving you that have shown up?
So, a little bit of a backstory. My walk in Christianity, I think, is just very different. I grew up in the Episcopal Church, and so everything that we did, it was printed out on a sheet of paper, and we had a hymnal, we had a prayer book, and we had Rite 1 and Rite 2. And over the years, I memorized them.
Yeah.
So everything was just very ritualized. And quiet. We had a choir, but it was quiet. There wasn't any standing up and shouting and things like that. So as I moved into my 20s and, I had my son, I really began to kind of struggle with whether or not I was actually being fed and understanding what my walk with Christ was supposed to be like. And I had to spend those moments of sitting back and really observing, like, what was I really getting out of these church services? Was I here just because I grew up Episcopalian? Was I here because I really felt connected to Christ through the teachings that I was receiving at the church? Why was I here? And then what was my son receiving? And so I had these moments of, I'm not getting what I need. I'm leaving church and I'm feeling lost or feeling like, what did I just sit through for an hour?
Yeah.
And my dad was a very, very frank person when it came to life lessons. And in reflecting on the conversations that I would have with him about, leaving the Episcopal Church and going somewhere else, he was always like, you have to do what you feel is best for you. And so I did, and I ended up leaving the Episcopal Church. I actually kind of not really wavered, but I tried to find the right place, went to several different churches and it just didn't feel right. And then I was invited to Oak Gardens one Sunday, and it happened to have been a Sunday that my dad was in the hospital. He had been diagnosed with intestinal cancer. And so it was at a stage 3 at this point. And there wasn't much that could be done. So I came to church here and I just sat and I just observed and I was quiet. I was around family. My aunts, my cousins were here. And as I sat there, something in me just kind of clicked. I don't know what it was, but it just clicked. And it was like, gosh, you are supposed to be here. And I ended up going up to the altar call. I had never done that before. Yeah. It was completely new to me, but I just felt called to go up there and cried and cried and cried. And Pastor Day came over and I heard my cousin say, her dad is not doing well. And he prayed and he said, give her the strength to know that your will is what will be done and that it will be okay. And that has stuck with me all of these years.
Wow.
And so I made a decision then, to join the church. But I think that, to your question, it really was, again, being able to just sit and just listen and observe and not try to make a decision, off of what I think I see or I think that I hear. And that is what I've held on through those teachings from my dad. So
Yeah, yeah. That's a beautiful picture. I feel like life is very much this sequence of steps. You move to one spot and then you move to the next, and you can't get to step 10 without taking step 2. And what you just communicated, or at least what I just received, is there was a sequence of events in life that, one, someone invited you to church here. And I don't know if that was the first time they invited you. And now, okay, so and you
yeah.
showed up and received that right away. I think that's a beautiful picture, and the context in which you come out of. Like all of us have our different, the different things that we show up with. And I think that's what makes Oak Garden so beautiful, is that we do have people with the Episcopalian background, as you do, the Protestant background,
Mhm.
obviously this being a Church of Christ, that heritage. But we all just come together and somehow make it
Yes.
work, actively. Like, how did you? So it sounds like you could feel God working in that moment, to connect through the prayer for Dr. Day, like all of that good stuff. Like, when you feel God working in your life, what does that feel like? How does it translate to for you?
So I believe that I've had these moments where he was just screaming at me. And I felt them physically, like I would get this sensation of just heat that would rise up in me. And it was always when I knew I should have done something. Um, and so it's in those moments where I completely stop and I go exact back to whatever it was. For instance, there was a lady that was on the side of the road. I passed her. My son and I were actually heading home from my aunt's house, and she was just sitting there on the side of the road. And something said to me, "Oh my God, I need to get her something to eat." And I was attempting to just drive on to the house. I was like, "Oh, let me just go on and go home."
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just this surge of heat that came over me. And I just kept driving up to Luby's. I went and got her something to eat and went back and just dropped it off to her.
Yeah.
You know, um, it's, it, I never felt it before like that. And so I try and be very present when that feeling comes up. Um, I try to pay attention to my surroundings. I try to make sure that I'm not passing an opportunity by to be what Christ is calling us to be.
Yeah.
Because I always had this thing, Carl, where it was like, I can't really testify because I don't know the Bible in and out like some people do, where they can just call out scriptures and stuff and be Johnny on the spot,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so I always stayed away from, talking about my journey because I was like, I have to have Bible behind it, you know? But the more and more that I walk and the more and more that my faith grows, I understand like if I didn't know what the Bible said, it was how I'm living my life,
Facts. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's what Eric Moore says is, we are the pages. It's
Mm,
like, we are living, walking history, and our testimony is just what you just laid out. It's our journey. It's our walk with God. It's the way that He shows up and, whispers or screams to us, communicates to us what He wants us to do. And sometimes because we don't talk about it as openly as that, and because testimonies in our mind have been, let me tell you what the Lord's done, right? And then the organ hits right after, right? It's like it's because it's been that.
yeah.
And sometimes we don't feel like we have this grand testimony of, let me tell you about the time my account was negative and I still paid all my bills. Let me tell you about the time that I was sick and then they said they didn't find anything. Because we don't have those type of stories, I think, to your point, we shy away from just communicating those small incremental things that God does in our lives. And what's beautiful about what you said, the being present and
Mhm.
taking every opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus, I think we miss. So, like, shout out to you and thanks for sharing that, because I'm sure all of us hearing and receiving that can now identify aspects of our day when we can show up.
Yeah.
and witness. And it doesn't have to be a big, big to do about it, right?
It doesn't. And I mean, for me, it's been in those moments to share. Even, as we're getting out of church and I'm talking to some of my friends and things, in those moments, you grow more and more secure in just talking about what God has done in your life. I mean, when I was going through my cancer journey, I chose to be public about it on, Facebook because I didn't know anyone that was my age that was going through, you know, breast cancer and was working and had a kid in college. Like everyone I knew was old that had gone through it. And so I chose to share my story. And it has been amazing to open up like that because, I have, sisters here at the church and they're calling me and they're like, hey, Sheena, listen, I got to go in for my mammogram and I'm scared. And I'm like, I don't care if you're scared, you're going to go in, you're going to do it and you'll survive,
Yeah, yeah.
but without me sharing, without being asked to stand on the stage that one Sunday and talk about it. And I was nervous because I knew that there were women in the church that had gone through this. And it was like, why am I chosen to stand
Mm,
up here and talk about my journey? Because I diminished my journey a little bit. I
mm,
didn't have to have chemo, I didn't need radiation. And so I almost felt like my journey through cancer wasn't relevant enough to be shared,
mm. Yeah,
and it was.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that exchange of where we are. It's the communication of where we are at any given point that opens us up to receive that feedback from other people who may have a similar journey and similar story. And a lot of times we just miss out on that added support and
Mhm.
benefit because we don't say anything. Like I mean, kudos to you for putting it out there, right? And what a beautiful thing, kind of to have that perspective and vantage point now, sitting on this other side, because a lot of times we just don't want to share publicly because we don't know what's going to happen next,
Mhm.
right? We don't know the end result, and I feel like if we knew how it was going to end. And we could see clearly, okay, if I do X, I'm going to get Y and Z that's going to follow right after. We would be more open to it. And so, thank you for sharing that. You know, what would you tell like all of your life experiences kind of leading you to this point, and kind of what you've experienced coming through the pandemic and everything. What would you tell the younger you? Like what would you communicate back?
So I would definitely tell the younger me to breathe. Um, I have been going on like this grief walk, and I lost my dad be 10 years ago in August. And I lost my mom last year in February. And then this year in February, lost my aunt. And I thought that I had done a good job kind of navigating grief with my dad until I lost my mom. And then to lose my aunt on top of that, it just kind of reinforced the fact that I really hadn't done the work that I thought I was doing. So, through therapy, we all need therapy.
Yes, Lord.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
we all need therapy.
Yes.
Um, I've been able to navigate some of the ways that I've kind of prohibited myself from just being, from
Mm,
just breathing, from really giving myself grace. Um, my son has told me recently, like, Mom, you just seem so connected with your emotions, and I thought I always was. I was like, well, I was a mom, I was a good mom, I was connected to you, I knew when you weren't feeling good, but my representative showed up to be very disconnected.
mm,
And it was kind of jaw dropping to hear him say that that's how he saw me, was disconnected emotionally. And so now for him to be an adult and to say, you just seem like you're softer, like you're more connected to how you feel. I kind of feel like, okay, so I'm doing some type of work.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
making some type of changes, but it would be to just tell myself to breathe and to really give yourself the grace. I think we tell ourselves all the time, oh, I'm just giving myself grace and giving myself time to just chill. But do we really?
right.
Because we're dealing with so many things every day, as Black women who are mothers, who are wives, who are professional women, who owning their own businesses, just living. There's so much that we intersect with on a day to day. Are we really giving ourselves a chance to just breathe? You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you said so much there. One of the words that jumped out at me and what you just shared is representative. And all of us send out a representative to our workplace, to our family reunion and get together, dinner at the table, like church. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is that representation of me, that representative that I've sent out, authentically me? And in most cases, I'm not going to say in most cases, in some cases, it's not. And then we have to
Mhm.
process um, the aftermath of what happens when we're not authentically ourselves and we haven't given ourselves time to breathe and process where we are emotionally. And and I think it becomes a cycle.
Mhm.
And for you, as you mentioned, Black women specifically, who are mothers, who are daughters, who are sisters, who are friends, you guys take on so many emotions, right? And I can't speak 100% for this, right? Because I'm not she, but
Mhm.
you guys have to process so many incoming emotions, thoughts, and feelings that are not your own, right? A mother for a child, a
Mhm.
wife for a husband, right? And I think sometimes we skate past that
Mhm.
just as a society, especially as men, and we could definitely do a better job of being present and supportive, um, but also encouraging, as you mentioned, therapy and a result of that space to breathe. In those moments, assuming you've had those moments to breathe, right? What has come up? Like, what would you say has been the biggest takeaway from just that pause and allowing yourself time to process?
I think for me, it's just the self awareness. Um, I think a lot of times in those spaces, because I journal normally when I'm just giving myself time to breathe. And my journal entries, I love to go back and read them, but I noticed that, recently my journal entries, it's almost like it's this conversation with God. I don't know what he's saying back to me, but I'm talking to him through my pages, and it's a from a position of like gratitude. My past journal entries, I've seen, there was pain, there was worry, there was anxiety. My entries lately have been all about just gratitude. For me, that's a revelation that I'm breathing because I'm able to focus on the good,
Yeah,
even in the midst of, grief.
yeah.
There's so much good that I put on these pages and thank him for. Um, in those moments of prayer, it's gratitude. That's what I lead with. I laugh because, Pastor Dave will talk about how, we pray and you laying in the bed and you fall asleep, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, let me start my prayer over again. But those times that it's happened where I've been praying and I fall asleep, it's always just the thank yous. I never get to the asking.
Mm, yeah,
I never get to the worry part of the day. It's the thank yous.
yeah.
So that's probably been the most important part of this journey is realizing that I can see that I'm breathing just through the way that my mind is just different. Yeah.
And that I was gonna ask you, like, what has been the biggest shift that you've noticed about yourself, kind of as a result of expressing gratitude and thankfulness to God. And a part of that you just said your mind.
Mhm.
But anything else that you can share that's really shifted?
man, just the way I take in information now, you know. I'm a Leo, so control is very much a part of who I am.
No.
Oh, you know,
No.
just and so whenever something comes my way, it's kind of like, I have to jump on it, manage it, control it. But the way I take in information now, it's just kind of like, okay, well, I mean, you know, what can I do about it?
Mm,
And if there was anything that I was going to do about it, like, would it really make a difference? I just think about the way in which I use that energy differently.
yeah.
You know, I try to focus on how I can be of help, how I can be of assistance. How can um I be in position to really support rather than do, rather than change? Because not all the time does someone need you to step in and do anything for them. Sometimes they just want you to listen. Sometimes they just want you physically just there. Um, so I think that's been a huge change, not just my mindset, but just the way in which I actively show up. It's not to control anymore. It's not
Yeah.
to take over. It's really just to support. It's, to be a part of and not always having to lead.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful picture, and one that I'm sure took some adjusting, right?
Just ask Demo. He'll tell you.
All right, Demo, let us know how did that go? So when you're at your best, right? When you are just, when you're clicking and firing on all cylinders, when you're feeling really good and in great alignment, have you identified kind of some of the things that allow you to show up at your best?
Ah, I'm a planner. So sticking to my plan definitely helps me show up. Um, you, I love to go off on a tangent sometimes, but when I do that, I realize that I lose focus
Mm,
of where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing. So sticking to my plan, um, praying before I do things, that has definitely something that I have changed. I would normally put something into practice and then go back and ask,
yeah.
God, hey, can you come on alongside me and make sure this works?
Yeah.
So again, taking that beat to pray about it first. Um, Gosh, I think also just those elements of kind of your emotional intelligence has helped. So becoming more self-aware, also socially aware. Again, back to that representative, like how am I really showing up? So making sure that I'm showing up the way that I want to. And when I am, I tend to perform my best. I tend to be at my best for others, which is really important.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think that's a beautiful picture. What if there's anything else? What would you add? What's something that we could take away and say, you know what? Here's a nugget that Sheena dropped on us today. Anything that you want to share?
I mean, honestly, for me, there's a difference in being transparent um, and being honest. And I think when we are honestly transparent, we really allow ourselves to open up to others. You can be transparent all day, but when you're honest about the things that you're choosing to be transparent about, it makes a difference. That authenticity really comes through. And that's something that I've tried to change. Don't just show up with intention and show up with the anticipation that you will need to strip away that wall, that you will have times where you'll need to cry in front of people. You'll need to be upset in front of people. You need to feel everything that you should be feeling in that moment, no matter if it is alone or in a group. But be ready to actually be honestly transparent. That is where I have found the most growth in myself.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. It opens you up to receive what you need, right? Like what you need to show up the healthiest version of yourself and get to that next step. And there's like nothing more to add to that. I feel like if church, because we're speaking about this in the context of church, if church could be that place where we all show up with just honest transparency about where we are, how we're feeling, how we're doing, the things that keep us up at night, the trials and temptations that we're dealing with, we can open ourselves up to receive that comfort and feedback and support and grow and develop. And I think for the time that I've been here on earth, like that's the exception and not the rule, right? And so it's like, how do we create spaces to do that? And so thank you so much for sharing that.
No, thank you.
If you were and you are, right? Like what would your prayer request for the next generation be? Like everything that you've experienced and you're like just saying, like Lord, I wish you would fill in the blank for the next.
That next generation. If I had one prayer request, it would be that the Lord would rain down humility on the next generation. I feel like with the access to everything that this current generation has, information and media and everything, there is this sense of entitlement and all-knowing that causes you to discount what has come before. So, Lord, my prayer request is for the next generation that you would just rain down humility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna pray for that. I got nervous. You said rain down. I was like, not fire and brimstone, please. No, no. But absolutely. Let's close out with prayer for that. Lord, we love you. Thank you so much for all of the lived experiences you've given to Sheena and her willingness to share them with us. I'm so thankful and appreciative of, the way she shows up and all that she represents to this body of believers, to her family, to her friends, to her coworkers, and everyone within her network. Praying that you continue to strengthen and guide her as she continues to do the work of processing those emotions and dealing with grief, but also taking a moment to breathe, be present, and show up with that humble spirit that she has, but also honest transparency to receive all that you have for her to take in, and just praying that everyone around her that surrounds her life that has an influence in her life and takes up space will pour into her, that will support her and provide the answers and solutions and things that you have for her. Lord, we're also praying for this next generation. Just the young folks coming up who have access to all the information at their fingertips. And Lord, over time, things have just sped up continuously, and we know so much. We can learn so much and have access to so much information that sometimes it gets in our way of finding that humble space to still take in information, to learn and show up with the necessary emotional intelligence to work and collaborate with others. And just praying that you will rain down a spirit of humility in the next generation, that they may reach their fullest potential, that they may be able to walk through all the doors that you have in store for them to walk through, and that they won't be stifled in their growth and development because of arrogance or a headstrong disposition that doesn't allow for them to receive and gather information from those who have been involved in various things longer than they have and have a rich cultural understanding of the lay of land and how they might be able to navigate things in the present. And so, Lord, we're praying for the next generation and also praying that as you continue to work in all of our lives, as we put one foot in front of the other, that you will show up and provide those angels along the way to support us, that we may grow and develop into the best version of ourselves. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.